Flyover country. Be honest, how many times have you repeated that phrase, or nodded politely while somebody else did? We didn't even invent it. We took an insult Americans coined about their own interior, imported it, and kept using it long after we stopped checking what was down there. For 50 years, the old continent has kept a quiet list of the American states it's allowed to feel sorry for. Mississippi, West Virginia, Alabama, Wyoming. The poor ones, the empty ones, the backward ones. The states our newspapers visit only when they need a photograph of a closed factory and a man on a porch. Then in March, a German carmaker announced that its largest factory anywhere on Earth, the one in South Carolina, had shipped $9 billion of cars abroad in a single year. Somebody finally set those US states beside whole European countries and did the arithmetic. The pity list didn't survive the shock. Every state on that list now outproduces an entire European country. Not a region, not a province. A country, with a flag, a parliament, and a seat in Brussels. Mississippi, the state we keep as a punchline, produces more than Slovakia. Wyoming, which holds fewer people than Luxembourg, produces more than Estonia and more than Latvia. Ohio, the state we buried under 10 years of documentaries about rust, outproduces Belgium by a third. A warship, 70 million tons of corn. A German SUV that was never built in Germany. Today, let's take the pity list apart one state at a time and find out whose map is out of date. Number 1. Mississippi. In the old continent, Mississippi barely functions as a place. It's a rhetorical device. It's what a columnist reaches for when he wants to say poor without saying poor. The state at the bottom of every American table. The one piece of America we're certain we have beaten. We've been saying it so long that nobody on this side of the water has bothered to look at what the bottom of the American table actually makes. But go and stand on the Gulf Coast at 6 in the morning, in a town most Europeans couldn't find with a search engine, and look at the thing lying on its side under a row of gantries. It's gray. It's unfinished. 11,000 people work at the yard around it. It is a warship. That is the first shock, and it is the smallest one on this list. The yard at Pascagoula is the largest manufacturing employer in the state of Mississippi, and its shipbuilders produce 70% of the United States Navy's surface fleet. Amphibious ships, destroyers, Coast Guard cutters, 85 years of them, from the same stretch of water. 7. Out of every 10 gray hulls that move through the Mediterranean, past our own coastlines, were welded together by people we've spent 2 generations describing as the losers of the American story. The destroyers that escort European shipping were built in the state our own press uses as the definition of failure. Now imagine explaining our coverage to one of those 11,000 people. He spends a Tuesday putting a destroyer together, and a European documentary that evening uses his state as the illustration of what happens to a society that gets it wrong. And then there's the number that ends the argument. In 2025, on the American government's own state accounts, Mississippi produced $165 billion of output. Slovakia, a full member of the European Union, with a parliament, a central bank, and a commissioner in Brussels, produced $154 billion. Mississippi is not a punchline, it's a shipyard. So would you still call the poorest state in America a warning about America? Or is it now a warning about the people who kept describing it? And if you live in one of these states, what does your county make that no European would believe? At least Mississippi has a coastline to point at. 2 more states on our list have almost nothing a European would accept as a landscape, and one of them quietly sells the world the ingredient inside our own glass. Number 2. Wyoming. If a shipyard in Mississippi is hard for us to picture, Wyoming is impossible. In July 2025, the whole state held 588,753 people spread across 253,335 square kilometers. That's 2.32 people per square kilometer. The Netherlands fits 18 million people into a country that size, at 434 people per square kilometer. Wyoming isn't underpopulated by European standards. By European standards, Wyoming is a rumor. But look underneath it. 60% of the world's natural soda ash comes out of one basin in the southwest corner of that state, and it leaves as Wyoming's largest export, $1.3 billion a year. Soda ash is the powder in window glass. It is the powder in the beer bottle in your fridge, in the tube of toothpaste on your sink, in the detergent under it. Go and look at those three objects tonight, and remember which American state we call empty. Wyoming also mines 40% of all American coal. Number 3. West Virginia. Now cross the country to the other state we file under finished. West Virginia is the second largest coal producer in the United States and the fourth largest producer of marketed natural gas, with shale wells now supplying nearly 95% of that gas. West Virginians use 3/5 of the electricity their state generates and export the rest, which puts them 5th in the country for sending power across a state line. Here are the numbers. Wyoming produced $52 billion in 2025, against Estonia at $47 billion and Latvia at $48 billion. West Virginia, the state that appears in European reporting only as a symbol of American decay, produced $109 billion. Luxembourg produced $101 billion. Luxembourg, the richest small country we have, the one we hold up as proof that a European state can be run properly. 2 states we call empty, both of them load-bearing. So which of the two is really the empty one? The state with the mine, or the country that buys what comes out of it? And this isn't an American boast. Brussels ran the same comparison on income per head. Only Luxembourg and Ireland sit above the American average at all. Denmark, our model of the well-run society, sits below 28 individual American states. So would you rather run the best-managed country in Europe, or a state our newspapers call a graveyard? And has anyone here ever held up a European beer bottle at dinner and explained to the table that the glass in their hand started as a hole in Wyoming? The next humiliation on the list does not come out of a mine at all. It comes out of the ground in a single season, and one American state grows more of it than all 27 members of the European Union put together. Number 4. Iowa. Europe thinks of itself as an agricultural civilization. It's one of the last unembarrassed things we say about ourselves. The terraces, the vineyards, the appellations, the ministries, the subsidies, the idea that we understand food, and the Americans merely manufacture it. But in 2025, the state of Iowa harvested 2.772 billion bushels of corn from 13.2 million acres, 5.3 million hectares. That's 70.4 million tons. In the same year, the entire European Union, all 27 member states together, harvested 60.09 million tons of grain maize from 8.46 million hectares. That is the sort of sentence a European is trained not to believe, and the shock is not the corn. The shock is the arithmetic underneath it. One American state, with one crop, outgrew the whole Union. 27 agriculture ministries, 24 official languages, one common agricultural policy. All of it out-farmed by a place most of us couldn't find on a map. And the land does not explain it away. The Union farmed 58% more ground for its maize than Iowa did, and brought in 15% less grain. Picture the harvest as a queue of trucks instead of a number. 70 million tons leaving one state, past grain elevators that stand over towns you could drive through in a minute, onto barges on the Mississippi, out through the Gulf, into the world market that sets the price of the bread on a European table. And Iowa isn't only a field. It runs the mills, the ethanol plants, the hog barns and the insurance towers that sit on top of the crop, and its 2025 output came to $277 billion. Hungary, a country with 1,000 years of statehood, an army and a veto in the European Council, produced 246 billion. So Iowa is not simply farmland having a good year. One state out-harvested a union of 27. So who's feeding whom here? Would you bet your own week's shopping on a European harvest, or on an American one? And would you still call American food industrial if the industry in question is the one that refills your supermarket in a bad European harvest year, at the price you saw on the shelf last week? The next state on the list does not grow anything at all. It moves things, and it does most of the moving while you are asleep. Number 5. Kentucky. In the old continent, Kentucky is a costume, which is why the shock is so cheap to deliver. Bourbon, horses, a man in a white suit, a banjo somewhere off camera. It's the America we find charming, precisely because we have decided it is harmless. But there is an airport in that costume state which is quiet through the afternoon and becomes one of the busiest places in the Western Hemisphere after midnight. UPS Worldport, in Louisville, runs 300 flights a day and moves 2 million packages a day, with the capacity to sort 416,000 packages and documents in a single hour. Whatever you ordered last week, if it crossed an ocean, there's a serious chance it spent part of the night in Kentucky, sorted and gone again before you woke up. And the state doesn't stop at moving other people's goods. Toyota Motor Manufacturing Kentucky, in Georgetown, is the largest vehicle plant Toyota operates anywhere on Earth. Not in Japan. In Kentucky, it covers 8.1 million square feet, about 750,000 square meters, and it's built to turn out 550,000 vehicles and more than 600,000 engines a year. From a company whose whole reputation was built on the idea that this kind of precision only happens at home. There's a version of this comparison Europeans are comfortable with. A big country has a big logistics hub, a big country has a big car plant, and the numbers are big because America is big. But Kentucky isn't America. Kentucky is one state out of 50, and not one of the 50 we were ever told to take seriously. Kentucky produced $306 billion of output in 2025. Greece produced $280 billion. The state we picture as a porch and a fiddle outproduces the country that invented the word we use for our own political system. Kentucky is not a costume, it's a conveyor belt. Would you have guessed that the biggest Toyota factory in the world sits in the American South? And can anyone here explain how a shed in Kentucky moves 2 million boxes before breakfast, while our own parcel spends 9 days crossing 2 countries that share a currency? But a Japanese car assembled in Kentucky is only the warm-up. 2 states further south, they build the airliner you flew here on, and the car in the German advertisement. Number 6. Alabama. The president of Germany's own Federation of Industry said last year that without decisive countermeasures, the country faces creeping deindustrialization, with its energy-intensive sectors gradually moving production somewhere else. He said, "The substance of German industry is under threat." He didn't say where the production goes. It goes to Alabama. Then it goes to South Carolina. Start with the aircraft, because Airbus is the proudest object the old continent has ever assembled. It's our answer to Boeing and our answer to the accusation that Europe can't build anything at scale anymore. French wings, German fuselage sections, a Spanish tail, a continent proving it can still make something that leaves the ground. But on the 13th of October 2025, Airbus inaugurated its second A320 final assembly line in Mobile, Alabama, the third assembly line at that site, doubling the size of the facility. The site has already delivered 600 aircraft to customers in the United States and Latin America. The shock is not that Airbus builds abroad. The shock is where. The European aerospace champion didn't expand in Toulouse or Hamburg. It expanded in the state, our own coverage files permanently under caution. Hold that next to the thing our newspapers say about Alabama. In their coverage, it is a place with a difficult past and a poor present. In an Airbus press release, it's where the wings go on. Alabama does the same thing to the German car industry. The Mercedes-Benz plant at Vance is the company's global export hub for its SUVs. 60% of what it assembles leaves the country, and in 2025, it ranked second in the entire United States for automotive exports. Mercedes has since committed another $4 billion to the state and built its 5 millionth vehicle there. Not 5 million American cars, 5 million Mercedes. Alabama produced $341 billion in 2025. Finland, the country we quote in every article about education, design, and quality of life, produced $317 billion. Number 7, South Carolina. Now let's go east to the coast, where it gets worse. BMW's plant Spartanburg is the largest BMW plant in the world, assembling more than 1,500 vehicles every day. In 2025, it built 412,799 X models, and it was the largest automotive exporter by value in the entire United States, shipping nearly 200,000 of them abroad for $9 billion. Since 2014, that single plant has exported almost 3 million vehicles worth $113 billion, most of them out through the Port of Charleston, to about 120 markets. And this isn't one company making one strange decision. Germany's Chemical Industry Association spent last year telling its own government that the relief package on electricity prices solves only a small part of the acute problems its members face, and does nothing for their international competitiveness. That's the polite version. The impolite version is a port in South Carolina loading BMWs bound for this side of the Atlantic. South Carolina produced $378 billion in 2025. Portugal produced $346 billion. A state most Europeans know, only from hurricane coverage, outproduces the country that ran the first ocean-going empire on our continent. The next German SUV you see in your street was probably screwed together in Carolina. The badge is European. The building is not. The next time you board an A320, look for the plate by the door and ask which side of the Atlantic closed that fuselage up. So does the old continent still lead the world in engineering? Or is Munich the branch office now, and Spartanburg the parent? None of this happened by accident, and it didn't happen because Americans are cleverer than we are. It happened for a reason we've all been reading about for 3 years and refusing to connect to anything. Why the old continent stopped. Europe didn't decide to stop making things. Europe decided a series of other things, and this is what came out the other end. But look at what a European switch costs to turn on. In 2025, electricity for energy-intensive European industry cost twice what it cost in the United States, and average European industrial power ran 2.5 times the American price. That gap isn't an abstraction on a chart. For a large car plant, that's 500 million euros a year, more than an American competitor pays, and for a chemical plant, it's closer to 1 billion. You can watch what that does. And you can watch it in a car park. Volkswagen has agreed to cut 734,000 units of capacity out of its German plants before 2030, and to remove more than 35,000 German jobs by the end of the decade. That is a shift, then another shift, then a gate that does not open again. BASF has stopped making ammonia, caprolactam, and toluene diisocyanate at Ludwigshafen, and it is closing plants at Cologne and Frankfurt. When the Commission finally wanted this explained, it went to the man who used to run its central bank. He called the problem existential. He put most of the gap with America down to productivity. And he warned that the alternative to acting was a slow agony, which is a strange phrase for a banker to reach for, and the most honest thing anyone in Brussels has said out loud. In 2023 alone, the gap widened by 12%. And 72% of that was productivity. There is a real answer to all of this, and it's the best one the old continent has. Output is not a life. The average American worked 1,800 hours in 2025 against 1,332 in Germany. and 17.2% of American output is health spending against 9.3% across the developed world, which means part of what we're calling American production is really American billing. All of it true, and none of it touches a single number on this list. A destroyer is not an invoice. 70 million tons of corn is not a hospital bill. The 412,799 vehicles that left South Carolina last year were not a co-payment. Europe did not lose a race. It priced itself out. So which half of that bargain would you actually sign? Would you pay European energy prices in exchange for European working hours? Or do you suspect, as your own industry federation clearly does, that somebody has signed you up for the prices without the hours? Which brings us to the word we've enjoyed most of all, and the 3 states we attached it to. Number 8, Ohio. Rust. For 40 years it has been the most useful word in European commentary about America, and the shock waiting inside it is that we never updated the picture. Rust Belt, Rust Town, Rusting Middle. It gave us photographs of empty windows and a moral about what happens to a country that trusts industry instead of the state. We ran that photograph so many times that we stopped sending anyone to take a new one. Ohio produced $966 billion of output in 2025. Belgium produced $725 billion. Ohio, the graveyard of our documentaries, outproduces Belgium by a third, and it outproduces Ireland too. Number 9, Michigan. Michigan, the state whose largest city became the international shorthand for collapse, produced $730 billion. Sweden produced $669 billion. Detroit is the picture we use to explain why capitalism fails, and the state it sits in produces more than the country we use to explain why social democracy works. Number 10, Tennessee. Tennessee produced $589 billion. Norway, whose sovereign wealth fund is the standard European answer to any question about money, produced $530 billion. Brussels measured the other direction too. On income per head, France has slipped from the level of the 36th American state in 2000 to below Arkansas, which sits 48th out of 50, by 2021. Germany has fallen from 31st to 38th, which is to say, Germany has come to rest at the level of Oklahoma. Those aren't American numbers written to wound us. They were produced in our own capital, by our own economists, and almost nobody on this continent has read them. The map is older than the factory. America didn't win anything here. A continent kept describing a place it had stopped visiting, kept the caption, and threw away the photograph, and taught 2 generations to feel sorry for people who were quietly building the ships, the aircraft, the cars, and the food those same generations were buying. The men and women in these states were written off in our newspapers while they were making the things in our garages. Nobody in Frankfurt or Milan or Lyon had to lie to make that happen. It was enough to stop looking. Rust is not a condition. It's a photograph. So would you rather live in a country Europe writes articles about, or a state Europe buys from? And when the next documentary about American decline opens on a shuttered plant in Ohio, will you check the date on the footage? Or will you do what we have all done for 40 years, and just believe the caption? Whose map is out of date? 10 American states we were taught to pity, and a column of European countries beside them, not one of which came out ahead. That's what happens when you set U.S. states beside whole European countries and read the figures instead of the captions. America is not a paradise, and nothing here says it is. The shock was never that the Americans are better than us, but the old continent has spent 50 years grading a country it stopped measuring, and the grades were generous to us. So how old is the map in your own head? And if you had to choose today, would you take the security of a European country that's described respectfully, or the raw output of an American state that's described as a warning? Name the state, or name the country, in the comments below, because that section is going to be more honest than the coverage ever was. If the video changed a number in your head, press like so it reaches somebody who still has the old map, and share it with the person who taught you the phrase flyover country. Then subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next comparison the old world forgot to run. This video was compiled from published statistical releases, company and government announcements, and public reporting for discussion and cultural comparison. Output figures are single-year national and state accounts, not a measure of any person's standard of living. It does not represent the position of any government, institution, or company.